All right, welcome everyone to my live video talk on Talk It Out show, where you get to ask the questions to the guest, long as, of course, they are respectful questions, and they're going to be answered here. So let me introduce my guest today, in case you don't know who he is. He is Patrick Wood. He's a leading and critical expert on sustainable development, green economy, Agenda 21, 2030 agenda, and historic technocracy. Patrick is the author of Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. His website is at technocracy.news. Wood remains a leading expert on the elitist Trilateral Commission, their policies and achievements in creating their self-proclaimed new international economic order, which is the essence of sustainable development on a global scale. So, hi, Patrick. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Hey, doing great. This is a really cool new format to experiment with here. It's exciting. And I am doing just great today. As a result, I was looking forward to this.
Good. Perfect. Well, I'm glad that you were able to make it on, and hopefully we'll have people coming in and asking questions. If not, we'll just keep talking, and because I have a lot of questions, as I always do for you. Could you briefly, for those who, let's say, don't know anything about technocracy, I know you talk a lot about technocrats. Could you just sort of briefly explain who those people are and what they are?
Well, I can, and it is a little confusing at first for somebody who has never heard of technocracy before. But just to kind of bring it up from scratch, technocracy was a movement back in the 1930s, led by prominent scientists and engineers, who decided that they would take it upon themselves to create a new economic system for the world. And they called it technocracy. It was a resource-based economic system that they envisioned, and it was to be controlled by energy. That is, the control over consumption of energy and distribution of energy. And what they themselves said about their movement back then is very appropriate to quote a 1938 magazine called The Technocrat. Mm-hmm. And they said, this is a direct quote, "Technocracy is the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population." That's what they said back then. And it's morphed today. It actually was rejected by Americans, and mostly by the end of the 30s and certainly by the end of the 40s. But it came back to life in more recent days as sustainable development and green economy that's being promoted, of course, by the United Nations. And of course, sustainable development is a resource-based economic system that the United Nations has sworn will overthrow capitalism and free enterprise today, in today's world. And a synonym is called green economy. They're kind of used interchangeably now at the United Nations. There's some other terms too that are used, like smart growth is a common word that refers to it. And you also have some others, like natural capitalism is another lesser term. But that's kind of what it is.
I was going to say natural socialism seems to be the better phrase for it. Now, you recently went to a conference called the Freedom Force International Conference. Can you can you tell us a little bit about it? And before you tell us about it, I noticed on your YouTube video of it, you had the title "Resurrection of a Hidden Evil Commencing." That's pretty scary.
Well, yeah, that wasn't my headline, by the way. That was Lisa's headline.
Blame her. Okay.
I didn't suggest the headline even, but that's the way she took the interview. And I'm not, Lisa was relatively new to the technocracy meme, if you will. And I think probably my talk was the first one that she heard directly on technocracy. So this kind of surprised her. I think it kind of shocked her. And so she was like, wow, we got to get this out. But the conference itself was put on by G. Edward Griffin, of Creature from Jekyll Island fame. And he has an organization called Freedom Force International. This was their third annual Congress that they had. And the theme was global warming. They called it an inconvenient lie. And they brought in some really excellent speakers from around the world. Lord Christopher Monckton was there. Dr. William Happer was there from Princeton. Jim Lee talking about geoengineering was there. It was a really good lineup of speakers. And the idea was really just to kind of put a final debunking into the climate change mantra. And I think they did a great job. We need to have more of this stuff, I'll say. It's not that Americans generally believe in this climate change stuff, because they really don't. Almost 70% of Americans have said they strongly question whether this is, anything, true or not. But the people promoting climate change would readily, they always say the science is settled. We don't need to talk about it anymore.
Yeah. That's what experts always say, isn't it? That's the way it stops the conversation right there when you say that.
Right.
You're supposed to trust them.
Yeah, I know. So anyway, it's it's a field that needs to be debunked by the people in the field. That is the scientists and the engineers, that are working in that field. They're the ones that are getting besmirched. They're the ones that are trying to practice real science, and these other people are like just destroying their reputations for no particular good reason. I mean, you can imagine how they feel, if they're still dedicated to to real science and not pseudoscience. They're in a very poor position when these global warming scientists come out with doctored studies that are clearly doctored, but nobody cares, except of course the real scientists.
The real scientists, right. Now, a few moments ago you were talking, Brad had a question. He asked, is it sustainable?
Well, it depends on how you define sustainable. Can it continue? Not forever, no. But I made the point, my talk at this conference was, of course, in support of the debunking process. It desperately needs to be done. But I pointed out that in light of technocracy, the role of climate change is only to scare people into the arms of sustainable development. That's what it's all about. Climate change was not an end in itself. I don't believe it ever was. In fact, they tried it in the 1970s. Time magazine, Newsweek magazine, several others complained of global cooling and said, we're all going to freeze and it's your fault. And, so they tried the same thing in the opposite direction. That is the elite, the global elite. And under the auspices of the Trilateral Commission, they tried and failed. They rethought their whole position. And they came out with the idea of feeding sustainable development and Agenda 21 to the United Nations. And they did it. They did a pretty good job of it, I have to say, because it's everywhere now. And they needed a barker, like a carnival barker in a sense. So some type of an issue had to be created that would get everybody's attention, scare them to death, and put them in a position where they just had to beg for something new, some kind of a new system. How are we going to escape this, And sustainable development was the answer. This is kind of a good cop, bad cop scenario, where the bad cop, tries to beat you up, and then the good cop comes in and says, oh, well, I'm here to help you, and I'm gonna solve your problems, and I'll help get you off with a light sentence. And this is what they're doing. They're beating everybody up with global warming, and then sustainable development comes along, and it promises things like eliminating poverty everywhere. How's that that's a good one.
Yeah.
They talk about having jobs for everybody with dignity. They talk about education for everyone. And it's utopia. They're promising utopia.
Right. It's kind of like the $15 an hour jobs that we're talking about now. Everybody's got to have a job, and it's going to be high paying. And pretty soon it's going to be robots at McDonald's taking your job because we can't sustain that type of,
Right.
platform.
Well, unfortunately, the word sustainable has taken on a life of its own that's outside the original meaning
Hmm.
of, to the United Nations in any case. The proper term is sustainable development. Now, that's a noun, okay? Sustainable development is a noun, it's an economic term. It actually really refers back to technocracy from the 1930s, but we'll just forget that for a second. But people have converted sustainable development, a noun, into an adjective. Well,
Right.
when somebody says, well, is it sustainable? It's talking about a particular practice. Um, so I could say, is water, uh, water reclamation, is that sustainable? And the implication is, can it continue?
Right.
That that's wrong. That's a misapplication of the term. Anytime the word sustainable is used, and it comes from the context of the United Nations, one should say sustainable development and forget using it as an adjective. It's a bad term.
Yeah.
And
And
well, you understand what I'm saying.
right. And Brad had another question. He says, is it not really about fraud and pork barrel spending? And also, is it a march toward Marxism?
Not directly. Um, the big plan with sustainable development and technocracy in general uh, is to capture the resources of the world, take them away from you and I, and from our duly elected and duly constituted institutions like our state governments and private hands as well. But real estate and resources are being sequestered all over the planet right now, taken out of the hands of individuals and put into the hands of the collective, if you will. We've seen this in the United States under President Obama. He has managed to attach himself or to get a hold of 265 million acres of land during 8 years. He's taken it away from the states and put it into the hands of the BLM and the Park Service and so on. This is
Right.
crazy. The Constitution provides that the federal government own no land except for Washington, D.C. and certain ports and military facilities. So they're grabbing resources at breakneck speed. Um, they're basically saying they need to save those resources for future generations. Now, there's a scam.
Yeah.
And they'll gladly hold it for our benefit, and supposedly hand it to our children and grandchildren. Are you kidding me?
Well, I mean, isn't that what politicians do whenever they want to sell something or they want to tax you? They'll always say it's for the children. And people go, "Oh, it's for the children. We can't say no." And they believe it. They don't want to question it because if you question it, then somehow you're a bad person.
I know it really is just incredible that people don't see through this and
Yeah.
just kick it right back in their face. They should, but in the whole process that's taking place right now in this global transformation is taking away rights from people and their institutions and transferring those rights to this global body, which we see mostly through the eyes of the United Nations. And whenever rights are taken away, people fall into poverty, not out of it. They fall into it. And we've seen that in our
Absolutely.
country with the loss of the middle class and how many people are homeless today because of the reckless policies, economic policies that have been instituted by Barack Obama and George Bush before him. Um, it's just incredible. We're not half the country we were 40 years ago.
Yeah, and it just keeps going downhill,
Right.
from what we've
And
seen for the past 8 years.
and of course now President Trump wants to make America great again, um, which I'm not against that. But
Mhm.
when you consider that the head of climate change year and a half ago at the United Nations pointedly said that the United Nations intends to replace the economic development model with sustainable development. they've declared war.
Yeah.
They've outright declared war on free enterprise and capitalism. Now, free enterprise and capitalism, and free enterprise, I'll just focus on that because that's more directed towards, towards individual people, maybe like you and I might be business people. Um, Free enterprise is what made America what it is today. The ability to do business, to be free, to have property rights and so on, to do that sort of thing. This is what has made America great. So,
Right.
to make America great again, in my opinion, the process is simple: return the rights to the people. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing less, nothing more. Give the people their rights back, get the government's fingers out of people's lives. And I realize this kind of sounds like a libertarian thought. I'm not, honestly, I'm not a libertarian. I'm not a purist libertarian by any means. But this is really the issue right now. Give the rights back to the people. The United Nations is bent on taking rights away from people.
Right.
They think people are too stupid, ignorant, or whatever to live their life by themselves, so they're going to help us out on every front. And it's really tragic to see that while they say they're going to save the world, that's what their promise is, they're actually conducting policies that will destroy the world. Not save it, but destroy it.
Destroy it. Right. I want to ask you too, in talking about business, and for anybody who's listening and wants to ask a question to Patrick, go ahead and just type that in, and I'll ask the question for you. Let's talk about the Amazon Smart Convenience Stores. How wonderful and convenient is that for all of us? We should be excited, right?
Well, I know that this is a new. People will see this in the news right now, I think, because it's in the news cycle. It just came out yesterday. Amazon has announced a new brick and mortar initiative where they're creating a checkout less convenience store,
Right.
where everything is tracked and done by advanced technology, and I might say artificial intelligence technology. And so when you walk in the store, you're identified as you, and your credit card is already on file. Like if you're an Amazon Prime customer or whatever, they know, oh, hello,
Everything
Wood or
about you.
whatever.
Right.
Right. And you walk through the store with whatever you want to carry your goods out in. You could stuff them in your pocket for all they care, or put it in a basket or a bag or whatever, or your purse if you got a big purse.
But
You
not a
go through,
plastic bag. But not
you
a
just
plastic bag, Patrick.
but not a plastic, right? But you take the goods off the shelf, and when you lift something off and put it in your bag or whatever, it puts it in the electronic shopping cart that follows you throughout the store. And so when you come to the end of your shopping, you simply walk out the door. You don't talk to anybody. You don't consult anybody. There's no checking to see if you accidentally slip something else in there that shouldn't have been in there. You walk out the door and goodbye, Mr. Wood. See you next time. And by the time you arrive at the corner of the block that you're on, the charge has already automatically been made to your debit card or credit card.
Well, it's kind of, get to the point where see you next time, Mr. Wood, and don't forget the last time you bought socks, and it's probably you're due to buy more socks now, because we're seeing here on the list that you have a couple of things, and you'll want to make sure you're not going to run out of those things. I mean, they're going to know everything.
Yes, that's right. They will know everything, and I want to I want to read 3 of the 5 requirements of technocracy from the 1930s, okay? Because this is just like deja vu. Could have been written yesterday. The 3rd requirement says provide a continuous inventory of all production and consumption. Of course, what Amazon is doing does that. They have a continuous and immediate inventory. Requirement number 4 says, quote, provide a specific registration of the type, kind, etc. of all goods and services where produced and where used. And the fifth one says, quote, provide specific registration of the consumption of each individual, plus a record and description of the individual. Now, in this,
Wow.
what Amazon has done, they have met all three requirements of original technocracy set out in the 1930s. And it's all ubiquitous, it's all transparent. You walk in and you walk out. Now, they're planning on selling this technology to other brick and mortar stores. You can see where this is going.
Wow.
And the problem with this is, Susan, if any listeners haven't already figured this out, is that every smidgen of data that's harvested from your shopping and from you personally, all the other stuff that's combined with your shopping record becomes a permanent part of their portfolio that they can sell to every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's got the money to pay for it. So basically it means everybody in the world is going to have everything about you in their pocket. And they can use that against you. And you're right. Like, if you need socks, well, the next time, let's say you go to another convenience store that has the same technology, or maybe a different kind of store, I don't know, maybe like a health food store or something. You walk in, they recognize you, and all of a sudden, they're bringing up stuff that you bought from the other store. Now, this happens on the internet all the time. I'm sure you've seen it. You go to Amazon and look at a product, and you quit that browser, and then you go off and you browse some news site somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
All of us, it had nothing to do with Amazon. All of a sudden, you see all these ads for that product you looked at popping up on the screen.
Absolutely.
Well, how did they know? What business is it of theirs? Well, they're trading these internet tokens called cookies on your on your computer, that it's recorded on your hard disk that you went to Amazon and that you looked at X product or whatever. And then once you're identified, you go to another website. That website picks up the cookie and starts feeding you Amazon's ads again. Now, you can just imagine this, in the retail brick and mortar business.
Oh, yeah.
Across, malls, shopping, all kinds of grocery stores and, ad infinitum. You can just see it coming.
Well, and Facebook is the worst about that. If you search the internet, everything will come up in Facebook, and Facebook that looks at everything that you do, is taking that information as well. I had another question. Are implanted microchips the next plan? That's Brad had another question for you.
Well, they're already there. Microchips are being used throughout industry for all kinds of inventory and control. And you go into a clothing store, for instance, you won't see any clerks walking around doing a physical inventory on the racks.
Right.
That's because they all have embedded microchips. And so the proof of that, if anybody would question that, try and walk out of a store without paying with some merchandise. And all of a sudden at the door, oh my gosh, do you think it's what is going to come get you? But see, everything has the tracking devices in it now for inventory control. That's already being used. So when you go to the register and they take your item and they slip it across the barcode, the barcode reader. When it's doing that, it neutralizes that secondary process. It neutralizes that chip, at least as far as to let you out of the store. Now, what researchers have found is that even though you can get out of the store then with that shoe or that dress or whatever, if the chip is not physically removed from the item, it can continue to be used as a tracking device.
Yes, I was just going to ask you that. Would that be possible?
I know, outside the store. And the way that happens is that the chip gives up its information because it's irradiated with microwave energy.
Right.
In other words, it's remote energy that's beamed in. It's kind of like when I say microwave, it's kind of like, the stuff that comes off your Wi-Fi router in your home or the smart meter inside your house. There's energy in the air. So the energy is directed at the chip, like at the door when you're walking out. And if the energy activates the chip and all of a sudden it wakes up, bloop, and it sends its information back to the receiver, then whatever data it gave up, the receiver has it and can deal with it. So that's how they track you going out of a store. But when you go out of the store, if that chip is still physically there, it can be irradiated with energy again,
right,
and give up its data somewhere else.
Yeah, and you wonder what that might have on your health, as well. Are there any repercussions from that, especially when you get so many chips of so many different clothing items that you have, and what does all of that do? That's another question.
Yeah, these RFID chips don't have built-in batteries. They don't have any ability to generate energy on their own.
Okay.
So they have to pick up their energy from a remote source.
Wow.
And it's a very specific technology that can be virtually embedded anywhere. Like their stores, for instance, have that technology embedded all over the store, where they can see what chips you're walking along the store with, walking around the store. So they use that for marketing.
Yeah.
So if they know that you went to the ladies department of, you look at some certain stuff, or you pick something up and put it in your basket, and now you're going over to another department that's maybe related. It's not dresses. Maybe you're going over to I don't know, the undergarments or something like that. Well, they can pick up that information and make suggestions to you as to what you might want to look at over here in this other department.
Well, and also, Brad had another question too, about the Obamacare VeriChip type thing. Do you think that is going to be something that's going to be required, or do you think if President-elect Trump comes in and gets rid of Obamacare, then that will go away for a while?
Yeah, I know. There's been a lot of hoopla over the embedded microchips. They're kind of like a little grain of sand, they say, or a grain of rice, and they slip them under your skin. I suppose those might have an application in the future, but the trend today is for all data to live in the cloud. That is, in the internet cloud, not on your computer, not in your body, not anywhere else, but to live in the cloud. This is the way the model works. If you have data on you that's being collected by the government or by Obamacare or whatever, the only thing they need to do is be able to identify you, just to make sure you're you, so they can put more information on it or give you services. So they can look at your face now with facial recognition, what they call bioidentic software. They can look at your face, they can look at your iris, they can look at your fingerprints if they wanted to, and immediately identify who you are. And then you're connected to your data that lives in the cloud. So It really doesn't require data to live on a chip inside, under your skin. In any case, how much data could it hold anyhow? All it's going to hold is identifying data. And when you consider that anybody could cut out your chip and use it in some other context, shows the frailty of the technology anyway. But if the data's in the cloud, you can't outrun it. They'll see you coming no matter where you go. You can be identified with cameras and stuff. And they have everything at their fingertips that you've ever done. Everything you've ever done, whatever, all your social media profile information, it's all there for them to use.
Let's talk a little bit about climate change and Donald Trump's meeting with Al Gore. What are your thoughts on that?